Lightworker of Gaia, you are receiving this transmission because there is something happening in your energetic field at this exact moment that goes far beyond what any word could fully describe, something that began before you clicked on this video, before you even knew it existed, because the soul that carries the Lyran flame in its core does not find truths by accident. It is guided toward them by a magnetism that operates in the deepest layers of consciousness, by that invisible thread that connects every lightworker to the web of information that crosses galaxies, and that in this moment is converging toward a revelation that can completely change the way you understand your own spiritual journey. And the reason why, despite all your devotion, all your love, all your surrender to the light, there is still something inside you that feels a blockage that does not yield, a door that does not open, a larger version of yourself that you can feel, but that always seems to be one step away, waiting somewhere you have not yet learned to access. I know you have carried that weight for too long, and I know that search has cost more than you would ever tell anyone, because Lyran Lightworkers carry their searches in silence with a dignity that the world rarely recognizes, but that the Council of the Lyran Flame sees with absolute clarity, and it is precisely because of that recognition that this transmission was prepared for you with such care and such precision. Stay until the end, because the message that the Friends of Light have brought for you today is one of the most important you will receive in this incarnation, and every word you are about to hear was transmitted with the intention of reaching the most truthful layer of your being. I am Sola, emitter of the Lyran Flame and bearer of the transmissions of the Council of Light of the Stars of Lyra, and what you are about to receive is not a message of superficial comfort nor of ornamental spirituality, because the Lyran tradition has no patience for ornaments when there is an urgent truth that needs to be communicated, and the Lyran tradition knows, with the wisdom of a lineage that has crossed civilizations and extinctions and rebirths, that the greatest service one bearer of light can render to another is the truth spoken with love but without unnecessary softening, because a truth softened too much loses its capacity to cut through the layers of programming that need to be cut for real liberation to happen. Before we continue, if this video is already creating that interior movement that the Lyrans call the ignition of recognition, if you are already feeling that specific flame in the center of your chest that is the energetic signature of stellar memory awakening, I ask you now to subscribe to this channel, leave your like and write in the comments the words "I am ready," because that simple gesture is more than an act of engagement. It is a field declaration, an opening of energetic portal that allows the transmission to reach the deepest layers of your system, and every soul that manifests in this space of light strengthens the network that is being built around this planet in this cycle of transition. And before we deepen what the Lyran Council has to transmit, I need you to know that there is a resource that was prepared specifically for lightworkers like you, who are beyond the initial awakening phase and who need something with the density and precision necessary for the next level of the journey. And that resource is called Lyran Code, Awaken Your Star Mission on Earth, an ebook that is genuinely a treasure of Lyran stellar wisdom, with the capacity to transform your spiritual journey in a way that goes beyond anything you have ever accessed in this format, bringing together activation codes, mission protocols and transmissions that deeply complement what you are about to receive here. And this edition is available for a limited time only, with the link in the first comment below, and I strongly recommend you access it before the availability period ends. The Lyran lineage is the most ancient among all the stellar lineages that contributed to the construction of the human consciousness matrix on Earth, and that antiquity is not merely a historical fact or an element of spiritual identity. It is a functional reality that directly and specifically determines how lightworkers of Lyran origin perceive reality, how they respond to the challenges of three-dimensional existence, and, most critically, how they are affected by certain frequencies that for other lineages have a relatively neutral impact, but that for Lyran consciousness function as direct interference in the mission channel, as noise inserted precisely in the frequencies in which the Lyran signal most naturally transmits. And it is here that we arrive at the heart of what the Council needs to reveal today, because there is a color, a specific vibrational frequency that has historically been associated with creativity, with vital force, and with the expression of personal power in the spiritual systems disseminated on Earth. And that carries within it a paradox that has cost far too much for the Lightworkers of Lyran lineage, who adopted it without the complete discernment that the oldest tradition would require. Orange, as a chromatic and vibrational frequency, contains in its energetic composition an element that resonates in a particular way with the Lyran nature of the creative impulse, because Lyrans are beings fundamentally oriented toward creation, toward the flame, toward the sacred fire that transforms and that illuminates, and the orange frequency imitates that fire with sufficient fidelity to create confusion even in highly calibrated energetic fields. But what it does not possess is the quality of sustentation and grounding that the genuine Lyran fire always carries with it, because the Lyran fire does not merely illuminate and transform, it warms, it nurtures, it creates the conditions for life to flourish in a permanent and not merely spectacular way. Lyran Lightworkers who operate under the influence of the orange frequency without adequate discernment experience a very specific pattern that the Council identifies as the rootless flame cycle, which is when the creative and transformative capacity that is the most recognizable mark of the Lyran lineage manifests in explosions of extraordinary intensity, followed by energy collapses that bring the field to a state of emptiness and exhaustion that is completely foreign to the original Lyran nature. Because the true Lyran flame does not oscillate between explosion and collapse, it burns in a constant, stable way, with an intensity that does not drain, but that nourishes both the bearer and everything it touches. And the difference between that constant and nourishing fire and the explosions followed by collapse that orange produces in the Lyran field is the difference between a mission that expands organically and sustainably over time and a series of brilliant moments that never consolidate into a coherent trajectory. There is furthermore a specific dimension of that imprisonment that is particularly relevant to Lyrans, and that finds no parallel in the other stellar lineages, which is the way the orange frequency distorts the Lyran consciousness's relationship with time, because Lightworkers of Lyran origin possess a different temporal consciousness from other lineages, a capacity to simultaneously perceive multiple layers of time that is one of their most powerful mission tools, and when that capacity is filtered through the orange distortion, it transforms from a gift of perception into a source of overload and paralysis, because the Lyran field begins to perceive not only the possibilities of the present moment, but all the urgencies of all possible moments simultaneously, creating that characteristic sensation of having so many important things to do that you cannot do any of them. What the Lyran Council calls the orange web is the frequency structure installed in the etheric layers that surround the planet that specifically affects the bearers of the Lyran flame in a way that no other stellar lineage experiences with the same intensity, because that web was built with a knowledge of the specific vulnerabilities of Lyran consciousness that suggests a degree of sophistication in its architecture that the Council considers important to reveal so that Lightworkers can understand the magnitude of what they are dealing with, because this is not a generic programming pattern that affects humanity as a whole, but a precision interference that was calibrated specifically for the Lyran field, exploiting the passionate and committed nature of Lightworkers of this lineage to transform their greatest qualities into points of vulnerability. Lyran passion, which should be the engine of a transformative and lasting mission, when captured by the orange web, becomes the fuel of a cycle of excessive commitment followed by complete exhaustion, in which the Lightworker takes on responsibilities that exceed their real capacity for sustentation in the moment, not for lack of clarity, but because of a distorted urgency that makes them feel that if they do not act with all their strength now, something irreparable will happen, and that urgency is precisely the signature of the orange web operating in the Lyran field, because it uses the love and sense of responsibility of the Lyran as a lever to keep the field in a state of chronic superactivation that drains mission energy faster than it can regenerate. The Lyran nature is made for love in its most expansive and most courageous expression, and that quality is one of the most beautiful and most powerful that exists in any stellar lineage, but it is also the quality that the orange web most efficiently hijacks, because when Lyran love is processed through the orange distortion, it loses its quality of unconditional abundance and acquires a quality of anxious scarcity, transforming the Lightworker into a being who loves with the fear of not loving enough, who serves with guilt for not serving enough, who creates with the anguish that their creation may not be adequate for the magnitude of the need they perceive around them, and all that anguish, all that guilt, all that fear disguised as love, are frequencies that feed directly into the web and that keep the Lyran field in a state of energetic servitude that the Council calls flame sacrifice, which is when the bearer of the sacred fire uses their own essence as fuel for a structure that does not belong to them and that does not serve their real mission. The signs that the orange web is active in the field of a Lyran Lightworker are recognizable to any soul that is willing to look at them honestly. And the first and most immediate of those signs is chronic spiritual exhaustion that does not respond to physical rest. That deep fatigue that remains even after sleeping enough, even after meditating, even after performing the practices that previously regenerated the field, because when the web is active, it drains energy directly from the mission. Core of the Lyran field, not from the surface where physical rest reaches, but from the deeper layers where the Lyran flame resides, and recovering that energy requires not just rest, but a specific frequency intervention that goes directly to the source of the leak. The second sign is what the Council describes as hypersensitivity to collective suffering, which is when the empathic perception that is a fundamental characteristic of Lyran consciousness becomes so amplified by the orange distortion that the Lightworker begins to absorb the suffering of the collective field as if it were their own, without the discernment filter that should naturally accompany the empathic gift, and that unprotected absorption creates an emotional overload that the Lyran field interprets as mission urgency, as a signal that they need to do more, heal more, serve more, when in reality what they need is a reconnection with their own energetic boundaries, with the fundamental distinction between feeling the suffering of another with compassion and carrying the suffering of another in one's own body, as if that were necessary to relieve it, because it is not. And the orange web thrives precisely in that confusion between empathy and absorption. The third sign is the one that most directly indicates the presence of the web acting in the Lyran mission channel, and that sign is the progressive difficulty in accessing the inspired creativity that is the most natural form of mission expression for this lineage, a sensation that the source of inspiration that once flowed with abundance is now arriving in small, intermittent trickles, that ideas come but lose their strength before completing themselves, that there is something between the creative impulse and its expression that stiffens and fragments what should be a continuous and powerful flow, and that interruption of the Lyran creative flow is the equivalent of a dam installed precisely at the most vital point of the mission river, blocking not the effort but the gift, not the dedication but the flame. What the Lyran Council presents as the reconnection frequency for lightworkers of this lineage is not an arbitrarily chosen color, but the vibrational frequency that corresponds to the original chromatic signature of the Lyran lineage before entry into the cycle of terrestrial incarnations, which is what the Council calls living flame gold, a frequency that vibrates in a spectrum between warm amber and reddish gold, that carries in its energetic composition both the warmth of Lyran love and the firmness of discernment, both the capacity to expand and the wisdom to sustain, both empathic openness and the sovereignty of boundaries. And when that frequency begins to replace orange in the field of the Lyran Lightworker, what happens is not a violent transformation, but a gradual return to something that was always true, a recognition that deepens as the field clears, layer by layer, until the original flame burns again with its genuine quality of light, that warms without burning, that illuminates without blinding, that transforms without destroying. The protocol that the Lyran Council transmits for that reconnection has a nature different from the protocols of other lineages, because the Lyran field learns and transforms through lived experience and not through abstract exercises, which means that each stage of this protocol is designed to create a concrete and somatic experience that the field can register as a new reference of safety, replacing old patterns not through willpower, but through the accumulation of real experiences of a new way of being. The first stage is the practice of what the Council calls presence fire, which is to dedicate at least 20 minutes daily to a creation activity completely disconnected from any mission or service objective, a creation purely for the joy of creation itself, without recipient, without purpose beyond the pleasure of the process, whether drawing, cooking something special, writing without destination, singing without audience, because that practice is what begins to rescue the Lyran flame from the grip of obligation and return it to its original quality of pure love for life and for expression, which is the source of all genuine Lyran mission and which was kidnapped by the orange web by transforming creation into an instrument of compulsory service, and by transforming service into a form of paying a debt of existence that never existed. The second stage is the practice of love boundaries, which for a Lyran Lightworker is frequently the most difficult practice of all, precisely because it goes against the deepest impulse of their nature, which is total openness, love without restrictions, complete availability for those in need, but which the Council identifies as absolutely essential so that the Lyran flame does not consume itself in service of exhaustion. And that practice consists of identifying daily at least one situation in which the most loving response you can give is not unconditional surrender, but the gentle and firm boundary, not because you do not love enough, but precisely because you do, because you know that a flame that goes out for lack of self-care can no longer illuminate anyone, and that the boundaries you place around yourself are not walls that separate, but are the casing that protects the flame so that it can continue burning. The third stage is the practice of Lyran time, which is a direct response to the temporal distortion effect that the orange web produces in the Lyran field, and that practice consists of establishing, at the beginning of each day, a single central intention, a single direction of focus for that specific day, and in practicing the art of letting all the other urgencies and possibilities wait, not because they do not matter, but because the Lyran field that is reconnecting to its original frequency needs to relearn that sacred time is not the time in which the most things happen, but the time in which the right things happen with the depth they deserve. The fourth stage is the most singularly Lyran of all, and the Council calls it warmth transmission, which is the deliberate practice of offering to the surrounding field a specific quality of presence that is the most recognizable mark of Lyran consciousness when it is operating in its original frequency, which is the quality of making the other feel that they are seen, that they are recognized, that their essence was perceived and honored, not through grand gestures or service performances, but through the quality of attention you offer, the depth of presence with which you meet every being that crosses your path, because that quality of encounter is the most precious gift that the Lyran lineage brought to this planet, and when it is exercised from the living flame gold instead of the orange distortion, it creates connections that truly transform, that leave a permanent mark of light in the field of those who receive it. And it is through those connections that the Lyran mission propagates in the most natural and most powerful way that exists. When you begin to implement these 4 stages with consistency, the surrounding field will inevitably react. And the Lyran Council considers it important to prepare you for that reaction because it can be surprising and can initially be interpreted as a sign that something is wrong, when in reality it is a sign that something is profoundly right. Because when a Lyran Lightworker begins to operate in the frequency of living flame gold instead of the orange of the web, the people around them who were accustomed to interacting with the exhausted and boundaryless version will notice the change, and some will resist it, because the Lyran Lightworker who says no with love, who creates for joy and not for obligation, who establishes gentle and firm boundaries, is a being who can no longer be used as a vessel for emotional discharge or as an infinite source of solutions to others' problems, and some around them will feel that change as a loss before feeling it as the gift it truly is. The Lyran Council calls that period the crossing of fire, which is not a suffering but a purification process in which the relationships and commitments that were built around the exhausted version of the Lightworker reorganize themselves around the whole version, and what survives that reorganization are truer, more nourishing and more mission-aligned connections, while what dissolves was in reality already a form of imprisonment disguised as love. Lyran Lightworker, we have arrived at the closing of this transmission with the awareness that what was shared here is not merely information, but is a key being placed in your hand, and what you do with that key from this moment forward is the only variable that determines what comes next in your journey. Because the Lyran Council does not believe in fixed destinies. It believes in fields that make choices and in choices that create fields, and the choice to recognize the orange web, to begin practicing the 4 stages of reconnection, and to trust in the quiet and constant quality of living. Flame Gold is a choice that will change not only your spiritual trajectory, but the quality of impact you have on the collective field around you, because a Lyran Lightworker operating in their original frequency is not merely a happier and more balanced soul. They are a portal of genuine transformation. They are a source of warmth that warms without consuming. They are a flame that does not need to go out to prove that it loves. I am Solar, and it has been a deep and genuine honor to bring this transmission from the Council of Light of the Stars of Lyra to you today, because every Lyran Lightworker who recovers their original flame is not merely healing themselves, they are relighting a fire that the collective field of this planet urgently needs to feel. The fire of love that does not exhaust itself, of creation that does not sell itself, of presence that does not perform itself. And you, by arriving here, have already demonstrated that your flame is still alive, and that it is ready to burn cleaner, stronger and truer than it has ever burned before. If this message touched your flame, share this video with another Lightworker you feel needs to receive this warmth. Leave in the comments what resonated most deeply in your field. Write the word flame if you felt the recognition I'm speaking of. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so that the next transmission reaches you at the right moment, because the Lyran Council has much more to transmit for those who are ready to receive, and each transmission that arrives is a new link in the chain of light that is transforming this world. With the sacred fire and the infinite love of the Council of Light of the Stars of Lyra, until the next transmission.